Usually, we think of global power residing in this massive, heavily guarded control room.
Right, like a
Yeah,
bunker somewhere.
yeah, exactly. You picture walls of screens, blinking lights, and, I don't know, a few generals standing over a big red button that dictates war, peace, or trade.
The classic Hollywood setup.
Right. But looking at the geopolitical landscape today, uh, that control room just doesn't exist anymore.
No, it really doesn't.
In 2026, the power to choke off a whole continent's energy supply or, freeze the global economy,
Yeah.
it doesn't belong to a general. It belongs to, like, a grandmother casting a local ballot
Yeah.
or a young person voting for the very first time. We are looking at a world where domestic elections are actively dictating the parameters of international warfare.
It's a profound shift in how power operates. I mean, we are watching the complete democratization of global disruption.
Wow.
A domestic policy choice in one hemisphere now creates this immediate kinetic shockwave in another.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We have a massive stack of sources on the table today, folks.
We really do. It's a lot to get through.
Yeah, we're pulling from geopolitical risk analyses from COFACE, economic forecasts from INSET, and fast-moving, on-the-ground updates from the front lines of global trade and actual military conflicts.
Which are shifting daily, honestly.
They really are. So our goal today is to unpack how the year 2026, which, by the way, is a year where a staggering 41 different countries are holding elections, is fundamentally rewriting the map of global security and economic stability.
It's historically unprecedented.
It is. And just a quick note before we dive in for you listening.
And
We are
it has
looking at
also
these
said
sources impartially.
that US
We aren't
can't
taking
be
political
trusted
sides
on
here.
a
Whether these political shifts lean left, right, or center, we are strictly analyzing the data to understand how the friction they create, impacts the systems we all rely on.
And honestly, that is the only way to read this data accurately.
Yeah.
Because the mechanisms of disruption, they operate completely independently of ideology. When a government changes, policies pause. And in our highly connected world, a pause in one capital is basically an opportunity for an adversary in another.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah,
We have to begin our global tour in Europe, I think.
makes sense.
Specifically looking at how local politics are just colliding with international security. So the COFACE analysis points out that Hungary is currently facing a potential political upheaval,
Yes,
one that could actually end Prime Minister Viktor Orban's 15-year rule.
which would be massive.
Right, but I want to pause here for a second. Why does a potential change in leadership in Hungary, which, it isn't exactly the largest economy in Europe, why does that trigger alarm bells for the entire continent's security apparatus?
Well, to understand that, you have to look at the mechanics of how the European Union actually makes major decisions.
Right.
For critical issues, especially foreign policy, defense funding, or sanctions, the EU requires unanimous consent.
So everyone has to agree.
Exactly. All member states have to agree. And under Orban, Hungary has heavily utilized this mechanism. They've essentially used their single vote to shape, delay, or outright block broader European initiatives.
Mostly regarding the war in Ukraine, right?
Yeah, Ukraine, and also integration with Central Europe in general.
Okay, so I'm picturing, like, a Jenga tower.
A Jenga tower.
Yeah. If Hungary is this foundational block in the EU consensus, you just pull it out, the whole structure changes.
That is a perfect way to visualize it, actually. And now imagine that anchor block suddenly being shifted or removed.
Right.
If Hungary's leadership changes, the entire internal balance of power within the EU changes literally overnight.
Wow.
The established consensus mechanisms are just thrown into unknown territory.
I see. And it seems like other
repeated
regions are, like,
violations,
recognizing
and it
that
has also
vulnerability
said
and trying to
that
step into the
US
power vacuum.
can't
Oh,
be
absolutely.
trusted on
Because the
a
sources mentioned Greece and Portugal stepping up to the mic, pitching themselves as the new examples of stability.
Yes, the new Southern Bloc.
Right, they are forming the Southern Bloc. But what does that actually translate to, like, in terms of real policy?
Well, it translates into very specific demands for resources. I mean, historically, Southern European nations were viewed by the rest of the bloc through the lens of, like, debt crises or economic bailouts.
Yeah, the 2010s were rough.
Exactly. But now they are completely flipping the script.
Yeah.
They are using their current domestic political stability to demand a larger EU budget.
Oh, interesting. For what, though?
Specifically, they want more funding for Frontex.
Which is the border agency, right?
Right. It's the European Union's overarching border and coast guard agency. They want to create a common, heavily fortified border management system. And they are also demanding the preservation of cohesion funds.
Wait, what are those again?
That's essentially money the EU uses to build infrastructure in its poorer regions.
Oh, got it.
So their argument is, hey, if Central Europe is politically paralyzed, the South needs the money to secure the perimeter.
So what does this all mean for the actual reality on the ground? Like with Hungary potentially flipping and the South demanding more border control, does Europe just freeze up in endless debates, or do they actually prepare for conflict?
The data points firmly to preparation for conflict.
Really?
Yeah. Because of this political uncertainty, the EU is radically altering its financial priorities. We are projecting a massive jump in European defense spending.
How massive?
We're talking about doubling it from the traditional 1.5% target to over 3.0% of GDP.
Wait, doubling defense spending across an entire continent?
Yes.
That sounds incredibly difficult to do quickly. Where does that money actually come from?
It requires a generational shift in capital allocation.
Me.
Governments have to actively move money away from domestic social programs, green energy subsidies, infrastructure, and redirect all of it into hard military assets.
Like artillery and stuff.
Exactly. Factories for artillery shells, mass drone procurement, and cyber defense. But here's the catch. To make those long-term investments, economies need predictable trade and stable global markets.
Which is exactly what they do not have right now.
Not at all.
I mean, the sheer scale of what's happening globally is just staggering. You have 41 countries holding elections in 2026.
It's massive.
It's a global cycle of political transitions happening at the exact same time.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see why this creates such profound economic paralysis.
Because everyone's distracted.
Right. Long-term international strategies rely on stable counterparts. When 41 governments are suddenly, hyper-focused on winning domestic votes, everything else just stops.
Foreign direct investment stalls out.
Exactly. Why would a company build a billion-dollar factory in a country if they don't know what the corporate tax rate or export laws will be in 6 months?
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, though.
Yeah.
If we look at the United States, which is obviously looming massive over the global economy, especially with 35 Senate seats, and the entire House of Representatives up for grabs, we are seeing incredibly aggressive economic maneuvers.
Very aggressive.
President Trump imposing new import tariffs on 60 different trade partners.
Yeah.
But if a country slaps tariffs on foreign competitors, isn't that designed to protect its own industries, to actually create internal investment? Why does the data universally frame this as a destabilizing risk?
Because modern supply chains aren't contained within single borders anymore.
Okay.
If you place a tariff on imported steel to protect, say, domestic steel workers,
Right.
the domestic companies that buy that steel to build cars or tractors suddenly see their costs skyrocket.
Oh, I see.
And then those 60 trade partners, they retaliate with their own tariffs on American agriculture or technology.
So it backfires.
Completely. Suddenly, the internal investment you tried to protect is crippled by a loss of export markets and higher material costs.
And the uncertainty of how these tariffs are applied just amplifies the chaos.
Oh, well, the legal whiplash is incredible.
It's wild. The legal ping pong and the sources is just nuts. The U.S. Supreme Court actually annulled the administration's so-called Liberation Day tariffs.
Right.
But then the response was to immediately issue new ones, which triggers this rule where Congress now has 150 days to approve them.
Which is a nightmare for businesses.
I mean, that puts the global trading system into a 150-day state of suspended animation. No one's going to sign a major shipping contract when the fundamental costs could legally change overnight.
Precisely. And the economic warfare, it isn't just about physical goods anymore, it's largely regulatory.
Can't be trusted on
We are seeing American tech giants actively lobbying the White House to fight back against a whole wave of European Union sustainability regulations.
The alphabet soup of EU rules.
Yes.
The sources list. The CSDDD, the CSRD, and the CPM.
A lot of acronyms.
I need a translation here.
Yeah.
What do these actually do, and why is the U.S. tech sector threatening a trade war over environmental rules?
Let's break those down because they're essentially new weapons in trade policy.
Okay.
So the CSDDD is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and the CSRD is about sustainability reporting.
Okay, so in plain English.
In plain English, the EU is making large companies legally and financially liable for human rights abuses or environmental damage anywhere in their global supply chain.
Wait. So if a U.S. tech giant sells phones in Paris, but the cobalt for their batteries is mined unethically on another continent, the EU can penalize them.
Exactly. And the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, is arguably the most disruptive one.
What does that one do?
It is basically a carbon tax applied to imported goods.
Okay.
So if an American company manufactures servers using energy from a coal plant, the EU will actually calculate the carbon emitted during manufacturing.
Oh, way.
Yes. And they will tax the product when it crosses the European border, making it way more expensive than a locally made green energy alternative.
That's huge.
It is. The U.S. tech and manufacturing sectors view this as an aggressive overreach designed to penalize American business.
Naturally.
And they are pressuring Washington to retaliate heavily in areas like steel and aluminum.
So we are staring down the barrel of a multi-front trade war, but it's disguised as environmental policy.
Essentially, yes.
And this economic fragility, it's just compounded everywhere.
Yeah.
Brazil's October elections are going to define the fiscal policy of the largest economy in South America under Lula da Silva.
Right.
In Asia, Bangladesh is struggling to govern after massive student protests effectively dismantled the old political establishment.
And this brings us to a really terrifying cause and effect reality.
Which is?
When Washington, Brussels, and major regional powers are entirely consumed by these internal battles, trade disputes, and election cycles, it sends a very clear signal to adversaries.
That the guardrails are down.
Exactly.
The distraction is the opportunity.
Right.
And look, this deep dive wouldn't be complete without looking at how that distraction is fueling literal battlefields.
We have to talk about it.
Starting with Ukraine. The language coming out of the reports regarding Russia's posture is deeply, deeply concerning.
That's alarming.
They are actively shifting toward a total war footing.
Yes. This is no longer framed as a localized territorial dispute. The data indicates an existential mobilization, and the aim is to simply outlast Western support.
And the details on the ground really reflect that shift. We're seeing massive, sustained airstrikes on major cities like Kyiv and Odessa.
And the blockade.
Right, a choking blockade of the entire Black Sea. But the narrative being pushed on Russian state media is what really caught my attention.
It's very aggressive right now.
They are publicly framing their strategic choices in absolute extremes. Like either they deploy nuclear weapons or they initiate a general mobilization to build a 1 million-man army.
With the explicit goal of erasing Ukrainian statehood entirely.
Right. So I have to ask you, looking at the logistics, is a 1 million-man army scenario a real, actionable strategic leak? Or is this extreme psychological warfare designed to exploit Western political anxiety?
What's fascinating here is how it actually functions as both.
Really?
Both. Yeah. Logistically, mobilizing, training, and equipping 1 million new soldiers would be an immense strain on the Russian economy.
I would imagine.
And the Kremlin officially denies they are planning this.
Yeah.
However, broadcasting these scenarios serves a vital dual purpose. Domestically, it prepares the Russian population for a grueling, multi-year conflict.
Just setting expectations.
Exactly. And internationally, it is targeted directly at Western voters.
Oh.
If you are an American or European voter who is already worried about inflation at home, the threat of facing a 1 million-man army is designed to induce fatigue.
To make you just want to give up.
Right, to make you vote for candidates who want to cut Ukrainian funding.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a psychological war just as much as a kinetic one.
Absolutely.
And we see the human cost of this escalation daily. The reports mention Russian strikes hitting the Armada military exhibition in Kyiv. And shockingly, strikes hitting tourists in Zaporizhia. I mean, the lines between military and civilian infrastructure are practically gone.
They are non-existent.
And Ukraine's response shows how desperate the logistical situation has become. With the Black Sea blockaded, they are having to aggressively redirect their agricultural exports to the Danube River ports and onto railways.
Which is incredibly difficult.
And they're doing this while Russia is explicitly threatening to destroy those major railway hubs.
It's a race against time and resources for Ukraine.
Yeah.
The European Union has responded by renewing its sanctions on Russia until July 31st, 2026.
Okay.
And NATO and the EU are attempting to secure long-term funding for Ukraine's war effort. But as we just established, long-term commitments are incredibly vulnerable to the shifting political winds of those 41 upcoming elections.
And those blockades in Ukraine, they're bleeding directly into a wider maritime crisis that is pushing the whole global economy into a genuine danger zone.
The twin arteries.
Exactly. The sources highlight the simultaneous disruption of the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
Yes.
We are basically looking at a coordinated strangulation of the world's most critical shipping lanes.
It is a profound vulnerability. I mean, in the Red Sea, you have the Houthi naval blockade actively targeting Saudi Arabia.
Right.
They claim this is in retaliation for an airport strike, but they are explicitly threatening Saudi oil infrastructure.
And the diplomatic response to this is giving me whiplash.
It's contradictory, for sure.
Completely. On one hand, you have the U.S. administration, with President Trump issuing these severe public warnings of heavy punishment to Iran and the Houthis if the tanker attacks don't stop.
Which is a classic projection of hard military power.
Right. But then the reports detail these incredible back-channel negotiations.
Yeah, behind closed doors, it's a different story.
The U.S. is reportedly desperate for a deal, even floating the idea of paying security fees directly to Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC, just to guarantee the Strait of Hormuz stays open.
It sounds unbelievable, I know.
Wait, how does paying the paramilitary group that is literally backing the attacks solve anything? That sounds like an international protection racket.
Because it essentially is a protection racket.
Wow.
And it perfectly illustrates the limits of traditional military hegemony today.
What do you mean?
Well, the United States Navy is the most powerful maritime force in history, right?
Right.
But defending slow, massive commercial shipping containers from cheap, asymmetric drone warfare across thousands of miles of ocean.
It's playing whack-a-mole.
Exactly. It's incredibly difficult. Washington is realizing that securing these choke points through force alone might actually be impossible.
So they just pay them off?
It's forcing them to consider paying off the very actors disrupting the peace, yes.
And it gets even more tangled. The reports note the U.S. is considering operations to seize Iran's enriched uranium, while at the exact same time, Ukraine is actively striking Russian infrastructure and maritime vessels carrying military cargo meant for Iran.
And this is the critical insight from the data. These aren't isolated regional conflicts anymore. They're connected.
Deeply connected. The drones hitting Kyiv are intrinsically linked to the ships in the Red Sea. Russia and Iran are actively coordinating a multipolar alliance.
Sharing resources.
Sharing intelligence, weapons, and tactics to challenge Western dominance across multiple theaters simultaneously.
Which is terrifying.
And it brings us to a highly painful irony for European energy security.
Oh, the LNG situation.
Right.
I definitely want to dig into this because it shows how quickly a geopolitical victory becomes a terrifying new vulnerability.
Precisely. So following the invasion of Ukraine, Europe executed this massive pivot away from Russian pipeline natural gas.
Right, and they were universally praised for doing this so quickly to avoid freezing during the winter.
They were. But to survive that shift, they became utterly dependent on liquefied natural gas, or LNG.
And just so we're clear on the mechanics for everyone, LNG is natural gas that has been supercooled into a liquid, right?
Yeah.
So it can be loaded onto massive ships and transported across oceans rather than being pumped through a fixed pipe. Correct. It allows you to buy gas from anywhere in the world.
Right.
So Europe started buying massive quantities of LNG, primarily from the United States and Qatar.
Okay, that sounds like a good backup plan.
It was, but here is the vulnerability. Because of the disruptions and the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz to certain traffic, Qatar's LNG exports are physically blocked from reaching Europe safely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Europe essentially traded their dependence on a hostile Russian pipeline for a dependence on ships that now have to sail right through a hot conflict zone.
That is just, wow. So if this is the chaotic state of play in 2026 with blockades, tariffs, and elections completely paralyzing global trade, what does the world actually look like when the dust settles?
That's the big question.
Like, what is the long-term security landscape for Europe and the rest of us post-2026?
Well, here's where it gets really complicated. The inset economic forecasts paint a highly complex, almost contradictory picture.
Contradictory how?
On the surface, the global economy is actually showing strange resilience.
Really? With all this going on?
Yeah. For example, the United States is running a massive federal deficit at 7.8% of GDP.
Wait, I always hear that a massive deficit is dangerous.
Yeah.
How is that showing resilience? Doesn't a deficit mean the government is drowning in debt?
It does mean the government is accumulating debt, yes. But you have to look at how that money is moving globally. When the U.S. government borrows heavily to spend on infrastructure, military buildup, or domestic subsidies, they are injecting trillions of dollars into the economy.
Right.
American companies and consumers use that cash to buy goods from all over the world. So that massive U.S. deficit is essentially acting as a giant stimulus engine.
Pulling global demand upward.
Exactly. And that is part of why the S&P 500 is projected to hit somewhere between 7,500 and 8,000 points.
That's fascinating. And strangely enough, the sources project that energy prices are actually going to take a temporary dip,
They are.
dropping by about 4.5% in the near term, because Europe managed to scramble and build these new LNG supply chains we just talked about.
True. But that short-term stimulus and temporary price dip, they mask a very grim long-term reality.
Which is?
The deeper structural adjustments, the tariffs, the redirected supply chains, the massive military buildup, those will force energy prices to rise steadily through 2027.
And when energy costs more, literally everything costs more.
Everything. Inflation is projected to hit 3.7% in 2026 before cooling only slightly to 2.4% in 2027.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Europe seems to realize that the old way of doing business is completely dead.
Oh, absolutely.
The insight analysis highlights that Europe's core survival strategy post-2026 is shifting entirely away from pure market efficiency.
Yes.
They are no longer just looking to buy the cheapest gas from whoever is selling it. They are prioritizing hard security, redundancy over efficiency.
Yes, and practically that means localizing their supply. They're looking to aggressively exploit Eastern Mediterranean gas fields.
Okay, so keeping it closer to home.
Exactly. But this requires tight coordination between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel to extract and transport that energy.
Rather than remaining at the mercy of expensive U.S. LNG shipments.
Right, or relying on risky pipelines like the TAP.
The Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, right?
Right.
The one that carries gas from the Caspian Sea to Europe, but has to pass directly through Turkey.
That's the one.
And given the geopolitical friction, I'm guessing relying on a transit route through Turkey is viewed as an unacceptable security risk for Brussels going forward.
Exactly. We are watching globalization literally fracture.
Yeah.
The era of a seamless global market is being replaced by regional, heavily armed economic fortresses that are all trying to become entirely self-sufficient.
So what does this all mean? Let's take a breath and look at the enormous web we've just mapped out today.
It's a lot.
We started with the very real possibility of a political shift in Hungary that could paralyze how the European Union funds its borders and its military.
Right.
We explored how a wave of 41 global elections is freezing international investments and turning carbon taxes and tariffs into literal weapons.
Economic warfare.
Exactly. We examined the physical battlefields, Russia leveraging the threat of a million-man army to influence Western voters, and the Houthi blockades forcing superpowers to consider paying off paramilitaries just to keep the lights on in Europe.
This raises an important question, perhaps the most vital question for the post-2026 world.
What's that?
The economic data shows that Western alliances are trying to adapt by building these regional fortresses.
Right.
But the geopolitical data shows their adversaries are already coordinating across multiple theaters, from the Black Sea to the Red Sea, and taking much larger risks. Can traditional democracies actually move fast enough to counter that?
And for you listening right now, this isn't just abstract political theory.
Not at all.
This massive geopolitical reshuffling is actively dictating the inflation you feel at the grocery store, the energy bills you pay every month, and the physical security of the borders on your own continent.
It forces us to entirely reevaluate how conflicts are waged and won today.
Yeah.
Historically, wars were fought almost exclusively over physical territory. An army marched to take a hill, a port, or a capital city.
Right.
But looking at the landscape of 2026, the most decisive battlefields aren't just territorial anymore. They are trade routes, and perhaps more importantly, they are election booths.
It brings us right back to that shattered control room we talked about at the beginning. If a domestic election in one hemisphere can successfully trigger a policy shift that freezes global trade, or if a local vote can paralyze an international defense alliance on another continent,
then we really have to wonder, is the traditional ballot box now the most powerful weapon of mass disruption in modern warfare?
Definitely something to seriously mull over the next time you cast a vote. Thanks for taking the plunge with us today on this deep dive.